is Ayaba Worjoloh. My mother is was Magdalene Aurelia Owilda Benyon McLean, and my father is Randolph McLean. My mother's mother is Aurelia Weeks, and my mother's father is Lawrence Benyon, and my mother's grandfather was J.I.A. Weeks, part of the Weeks people who came from Barbados to Liberia. I have many happy memories from my mom. There was always a presence of caring with her, and wherever she went, she carried a spirit and a presence of caring. I remember when we were small and my mom used to deliver newspapers, either Saturday or Sunday, one weekend, deliver newspapers, I guess for extra money. I can't even ask her now, but I think that's why she did it. So we used to get this big pile of newspapers in the basement of our home, and then she would pay us 5 cents. Child labor. She would pay us 5 cents to put each, newspaper in the little plastic bags that the newspapers used to come in back then. And then I would always want to go with her on the drive to the newspaper route, and we would put the newspapers in the mailboxes. And I just always remember loving to spend that time with my mom. And my mom used to tell me that I was jealous of my little sister. And so when I guess I was maybe 6 or 7, she asked my teacher, what can we do so that she's not so jealous of her little sister? So they said, you have to set out a special time for just you and she. So my mom said she would do that. She did that. She said, Yaba, what do you want to do for your special time? I said, Mommy, I want to go swimming. My mom was like, I don't swim. I don't know how to swim. I'm not going swimming. So then she decided we would just go swimming on the floor. So we just used to lay on the floor and I would just stroke, like you were swimming in the pool and she would be stroking right next to me. Like, I guess paddle, do the hands. It's the better way to say it. So we would go swimming on the floor, even though we had a swimming pool in our backyard at the time, but she couldn't swim. So that's how she went swimming with me. So she was just really caring, really thoughtful all the time. Seemed like all the time. And then every year, up until the time I think when she passed away around Christmas time, we would ask her. I would ask her. I'd say, "What do you want for Christmas, Mom?" And she would say, "I just want you kids to get along." She never wanted anything. She just wanted for us all to get along. So, well, my mom was an educator. She was a high school teacher. She also taught college. She probably taught other things I don't even know about. And so she always thought that education was really important, and obtaining a higher education was important. She never said specifically you need to go to the best schools, but yeah, we had to get A's. We needed to get A's in school. If we weren't getting A's in school, it was a problem. B's were okay, but we needed to get A's. So much so that they used to pay us per grade. You get an A, you get this amount of money. You get a B, you get this amount of money. C, you get no money. D, you have to pay them. So my mom was thinking that she wanted to be a dentist or maybe a veterinarian or maybe a doctor when she graduated from college. But then she came over to the States with my dad when he was in graduate school. And so she sort of put some of those dreams on hold to support him through graduate school because we were already there, me and my big brother. So that was the early part of her career in education. And then she worked as a high school teacher for some time, and she also worked as a teacher at a community college. And then she ended her days working at a local high school. Well, I shouldn't say she ended her days because she had just retired from working at a local high school in North Carolina when shortly before she passed away. So that's the trajectory of her career, but she was a lifelong educator. She was always working on something. If it wasn't schoolwork with us, then it was, doing the household finances or cleaning the house or helping some family member with this. Um, she had all these charities that she gave to and worked with to, I mean, she just was always working on something, like have something to work on, never give up. I don't mind, it's a devil's workshop. So she stayed busy. And she was very family oriented. She she had a list of all the family members, all the brothers and sisters on both sides of my mom's side and my dad's side, and she would go through, make sure that she was calling everybody on the list, over some space of time. And if somebody was like sick or shut in, she was always giving them a call, going to visit. Um, she stayed busy. She stayed caring. She really cared for people, her family, her friends. Um, and you just care for people and you don't give up on the things that you want to do. I would say my dad spoke more than my mom explicitly about going back to Liberia. Um, he would always say, Yabs, you're going to go back and rebuild that country. Yabs, you're going to go back and rebuild that country. And then when he had the opportunity, he did go back to do some work there. My mom, I remember her saying that she had a taxi in Liberia when she was younger. I thought that was really interesting that, a woman had a taxi back then. It just seemed like something a man would do. So that was really interesting. And then I think she also told me that just before the war or the coup, they confiscated her taxi. So then she didn't have a taxi anymore. So, the rebels confiscated her taxi. And then I remember her saying when they were coming here that she thought they were just coming to visit. And so she left her wedding dress, and she would have wanted to have had her wedding dress here, so that, me and my sister could wear it, I suppose. But yeah, growing up in Liberia, she did talk about she really enjoyed growing up in Liberia. She was the smart. I mean, I'll say they're all smart, but she was like more of a bookish person in the family. Whereas, some of my aunties were very good cooks and, helped out around a lot, helped out more with, I guess, the household chores. She was always the one in the book, getting her education in the books. Um, but she was also really great friends, best friends with her sister Glacia, growing up. And so I remember the pictures of them, mom and Glacia, Auntie Glacia, in their confirmation in the church, and that they lived all over. They lived in Italy as well as living in Liberia. Um, so yeah, those are the things that I remember. But she definitely always spoke of Liberia with great fondness. And as they got older, my parents, they went back to Liberia for long stints of time. So I mean, she spent months there. In I guess the 2000s. Both of them went back after both of them retired, to build a place. They found a home by the water that they were really trying to keep up and have a place for, us, for them, well into their retirement. And they were working really hard on the rubber farm. And when I say working hard at the rubber farm, not actually on the farm, but on keeping it productive and on making sure that the edges of the land or the boundaries of the land were being respected. And then we have some more land in Picnicus that to this day, I don't know that they've gotten, those boundaries delineated in the eyes of the law. But yeah, they were working to build back home, and still in process, even though she's not with him to help him, it's still in process. And so how would my mother want to be remembered? It's hard to look into somebody's mind and see. I know that she never wanted a big funeral. Um, I know that she was very like simple, um, simple in a complex way, actually, to a certain degree. So I'm not, I wish I had asked her how she would want to be remembered. I think because she wasn't a very flashy woman, it would just be as like a thread of peace throughout the hearts of all the people who knew her. My parents were definitely strict. My parents were definitely strict. We had very strict rules about when we had to be in the house, when we had to get our homework done, what we could do before we watched TV, if we could watch TV at all, what chores we needed to be done before we went out. So yeah, they were very strict. But as long as we got our schoolwork done and the house wasn't in a big disarray and we got home on time, um, they let us do the things that we wanted to do for the most part. I mean, I guess luckily for them, for most of us, that there weren't things that we wanted to do that were very bad. Like for my brother, he just always wanted to watch TV. For me, I just always wanted to go outside and play with my friends. And for my younger sister too, she always wanted to go outside and play with her friends. But we didn't have any major, you know, bad things that we developed interest in. So that made it good. I think my one sister, Afievi, she had a few more negative things that she liked to go out and do when she was a child, but she came from a rougher background, so it's kind of understandable in some ways. But yeah, they were really strict with like times and homework and things like that. My education and career. After high school, I went to college in California. After college in California, I went to medical school in North Carolina. After medical school in North Carolina, I went back for residency in obstetrics and gynecology in California. I also did a public health degree in that time. And then I did a global health fellowship because I thought that I was going to work internationally for the rest of my life. You know, whispers of my father, you're going to go back and rebuild the country. But it wasn't a good fit for me at that time. It wasn't really, I mean, it was the perfect season for doing the fellowship, but it just wasn't the season to be there for the rest of my life. And so I came back and I worked for the Indian Health Services in New Mexico. And then I met my husband and we had 2 kids and we have 2 kids. And now I work as an OB/GYN in Washington State. So that's my educational trajectory. I'm really passionate about women and women's health issues and the care that we give ourselves as women and the time that we take to know ourselves because we can get so busy with career and kids and husbands and culture that we don't really always know what's in ourselves. And so that's my focus now. Like, how do you get to know yourself well and take care of yourself well, despite of in the midst of all the other responsibilities that you've taken on and you have to take on because women run the world. Um, so how do you do that? So that's the next piece of the journey. I think that the most important prevention is lifestyle. And having a healthy lifestyle that incorporates a healthy diet and consistent exercise and some sort of like stress reduction slash meditation slash prayer, something where you're really taking that time to be with yourself and get to know your voice because you have to know your voice before you can use your you need to take care of your body from other sort of like checklist prevention things like yes we should get pap smears and we should get mammograms and colonoscopies um, and if your blood pressure is high do things to lower your blood pressure. If your blood sugars are high do things to lower your blood sugars. See a doctor on a regular basis. And be mindful about your doctor. All doctors are not created the same. And every everybody is not always a good fit for every other person. So those are the things that I would tell young people. Don't get too caught up in career. I mean, focus on your career, but don't let that be the entirety of your life. Um, and focus on your children, but don't let that be the entirety of your life either. Um, I think of my mom, who, in a lot of ways, I think she focused on her career, her husband, and her children. And then she decided she was going to retire. And then, what was it, a year after she retired, she dropped dead. And I like to think that she did everything that she wanted to do before that happened. But sometimes I wonder, like, if she hadn't had to work so much, or if her kids hadn't, been such a focus, like if she would have done something more. Um, I'll never know the answer to that question. But I think that when your body is giving you signs, or your mind is giving you signs that it's time to do something different, like really pay attention to that and do something different. When I was younger, I was really good at science. And that was something that compelled me to pursue something within the sciences. And I think within our Liberian culture, and maybe it's African culture, like we know doctor, we know lawyer, we know engineer. Those tend to be the three things that we really, and we know teacher. I think those tend to be the things that we really know. And so it's like, oh, you know book, oh, you like science, go be a doctor. If it was, oh, you know book, oh, you like to read, go be a teacher. So I didn't have a great breadth of career choices in my mind. Um, And so I was smart, I was good at science, I wanted to help people, be a doctor. That was just the equation. And so that's what I did. And as I got older, I became a bit more discerning. And, within the doctor field, um, obstetrics and gynecology really called to me because of the focus on women, and because I get to do some surgery, which is a fun hands-on thing. And because it's just like a really amazing time to be with most women in their lives, in their reproductive years. And even now, as I've been practicing for over 10 years, um, the OB part isn't the same draw as it used to be. Now it's more like really taking care of women in like their 40s or 50s or 60s or 70s, and longevity. How do you maintain youth, the quote unquote youth? And I'm not talking about looking young, I'm more talking about feeling young. Um, how do you maintain uh, youth and longevity, even as the body does start to change and fail in some ways? Um, so how do you do that, and how do you get that to women to really have the best life that they can live? I think the number one thing, actually, they both tie in. What's been helpful for me in my career, and what has helped me in my career, is an interest in being a lifelong learner. I'm always wanting to learn new things and figure out on a deeper level, how do things work. And for me, my interest is, the human body. And then it becomes, and now it's morphed a little bit into like mind body connection, mind body gut connection. I mean, it's becoming obvious in more and more literature that the gut microbiome like affects everything from your brain to your body. And what you put in makes for a better structure of what is going on within your gut. And most of your neural cells are actually in your gut and not in your brain, which I learned, in the past year, and I find that fascinating. And so being a lifelong learner and not being stuck in one way of thinking, um, because I'm an OBGYN, and when I was in training 10 years, we did things way X. And I just saw somebody do something way Y. Like, oh, why do you do that? And you know, why does that make sense compared to what we used to do? And then just really having an open mind to other, viewpoints and ways of doing things. Um, Being a critical thinker. Um, and if you don't necessarily have time to think of things critically yourself, knowing other people who think of things critically in other arenas, and having support, whether it's your husband or your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your wife or your family or your children, like having a support and staying in a supportive environment, not isolating yourself. No man or woman is an island. So, finding your tribe, that seems to be a buzzword these days, but I agree with it because I think it gives that sense and that importance of having like a support group. And it's not about just having people who think like you, because that doesn't really necessarily promote change, but having people who are open minded and who you don't mind spending time with. And you also can't have everything. Like I think about my practice specifically when I first started as an obstetrician in Everett, Washington, where the population is probably at least 80% white. And every time when I first started, every time when somebody would leave my practice, like, oh, what did I do? What could I do better? What happened? Why did they leave? And then after about, 3 or 4 years, I said, it's probably not me. And maybe it's also not them, but there's something to be said for the way that people interact and everybody doesn't mesh. Um, and that's okay. It's fine. And I appreciate having the opportunity to learn that. Um, so, finding your tribe, having the right support, and being a lifelong learner inspires me. My father inspires me. My children inspire me. Um, and Black women who are doing big things inspire me. Um, I just met a woman the other day who has maintained a private practice for the past 20 years in the South, and I'm sure that was no easy feat. Um, and so women like that I just see who are sort of take charge and they have longevity in their careers, or in their beliefs. A really good friend of mine is a pastor. Her mother's a pastor, and her husband's a pastor, and she's just gone from church to church since we graduated from college, and she's still doing it, and she still is like so passionate about it. She inspires me. A good friend of mine is an OBGYN out in Washington University, and now she's like the chief of research out there. She inspires me. Um, yeah, there's just so many Black women out there doing amazing things. They're also inspiring. Um, so yeah. So the first time I went back to Liberia was during residency. There was a maternal fetal medicine specialist who had just joined our faculty from New York, and New York, I think it was Mount Sinai University, New York, had a medical missions to Liberia. And so he was going, he found out I was Liberian, he asked me if I wanted to go, and I said, for sure, yes. So I traveled with this mission team back to Liberia, and it was an amazing experience, because one, I was back on the soil where I was born, and it was also the first time I'd been to the continent of Africa since being born there, and I'd always wanted to go back. And two, I had the opportunity to work at JFK Hospital in Monrovia, and there's a health system there that's broken, but I realized how privileged I was to be in the United States in a healthcare system that kind of works. It's also broken, but it kind of works here, but it really doesn't work there. And yet people are still working. The nurses are working, the phlebotomists are working, the doctors are working, and some people are stealing, some people are preferentially treating people, but they're still working. There was a real brain drain from that country when the coup and the war happened. And the people that are still there, who are still working, they I just admire that heart. I just admire that heart. And it was just amazing to be among other physicians, obstetricians, gynecologists who just worked through it all, and to hear their stories. And then they take care of women who really do a lot of taking care of themselves before they even come to the hospital, and really only come to the hospital in dire straits a lot of times. Um, and to just work with them and see them. So it was beautiful to, be among my people and to be able to help my people and see the frontline workers there who stayed on the front line despite everything that was going through. And yes, there's a lot of work that needed to be done then, and still a lot of work that needs to be done now. And this is not to say that people are doing things the right way, but sometimes you just have to do things. Sometimes you just have to do it until it gets better. And if everybody said, this doesn't work, I'm just going to stop working, I don't know that that's the solution either. So that was my first trip back. We also went to Bone County. I saw some beautiful waterfalls and waterways. And I mean, the country is beautiful. It was really a blessing to get outside of Monrovia and see like how beautiful the landscape is. The beaches are beautiful. The ones that are untouched, not in Monrovia, they're beautiful. It's a beautiful country, and beautiful people. And that was my first time back. We as women internalize a lot. And during the war, during the coup, there was a lot of trauma. And I think that the women and the men and the children probably are all still recovering from that trauma to a certain degree. So how do you heal the mind first? And then once you feel not always scared, not always panicked, not always reliving the trauma, not always trying to figure out, how to make ends meet, then I think you can start to work on, I won't say start, because you have to do some things in tandem. But then the work can begin to, have overall like holistic health. How do you change somebody's mindset? How do you change somebody's idea that like everything is hopeless, everything is futile, this is never going to be better? And that's, you have to have hope. You have to have hope before you can, go get your mammogram. Because so what if I get my mammogram, they tell me I have breast cancer? Where am I going to go? you know? And so you have to have some hope that there is someone you can go to. There is somebody who's going to, help you with that new diagnosis. Um, so I think, finding a way to change mindset. And then on a higher systems level, there needs to be systems that work and function. And, a place you can go to if you need to get screening, and that you will then the whole chain works. You get the screening test, the test actually goes to the pathologist actually reads the test then gets back to the person who screened you, who then gets back to you with the result, and then you have the next thing available in some form to actually treat whatever is found. And it doesn't all have to be in Liberia all the time. But we need to have some sort of access. So access to care is a big issue. and a good place to start. And again, I don't know how you make that sort of access happen in a system that seems broken from many perspectives. And in the meantime, I'm just thankful that there are some doctors that can work despite the uncertainties, and hopefully we'll have more and more change agents and people whose minds can be changed to make the next steps happen. My favorite Liberian food is pan butter and rice. And then I also really enjoy bitter leaf and pepper soup and ground pea soup. I know you said favorite. Those are my favorites. Liberian tradition, it's got to be the Grand March. I feel like I've been doing the Grand March since I was small. Every single event, there was a Grand March, and I like to dance. I love to dance, and I love to move, and yeah, so Grand March, that's the one. Great.
Start the party, we arrive on man arise. Look them sexy lady, look them tasty lady, them fine. Now so there's happy wine. Tell you, if I watch gonna yai, hey, if only I could fry. I they watch like a pot on self and die. I see short skirts, hey, the mini skirt. Oh, who swap for dance with where this party go start? I want Saleh, yeah. I want ballet, what you want? Makale, and the party back nyale. Overload, not to you business, but in a party you come. Left me make a overload, if the at you gonna do, oh, yeah, yeah.
Generations can show their gratitude to the ancestors by watching and paying attention to documentaries like this, always acknowledging that there are men and women who came before you who helped to pave the way for what you're doing right now. You are not an accident, but you also didn't just happen upon this life and the successes and the failures that you have. It's because your ancestors are watching out for you and they've paved the way for you, and giving thanks to them, acknowledging them, talking to other people about them, talking to your children and your other family members about what your ancestors have done, and the presence and the influence that they've had in your life is important. And even if you don't talk to anybody about it, just acknowledging it within yourself that, this way has been paved because of others who have come before you and probably worked harder than you, actually, because we do have a lot of privileges now that, even my parents didn't have when they first came here, here to the United States, I should say. Yeah, always teaching your children, don't forget where you came from. So the darlingism, my mother, she will always want to go to all the gatherings. She was at all the weddings, the funerals, the birthday parties, the high school graduations. And after all those things, you always go back to the house and there's food and there's drinks. When my mother was done being social, she was done. She would go upstairs to somebody's room and go to sleep. And so in that, she recognized her need for rest, which, in retrospect, I applaud her for. So we would just go make sure we wake up mommy before it's time to go. And my dad, on the other hand, could stay, hours after that talking and all that sort of stuff. But my mom would say, I'm ready. She'd go, she'll lay down, everybody knew she would go. I think everybody knew she would go and lay down. And then when it was time to go, you just go and get her. Thank you. I want to. Yeah. So my mother was a lifelong educator. And when she passed, my brother Boca, sister Tana, and my dad, and I really thought about what we would, do without her, which is, still yet to be determined in some ways. But one thing that we could do was to do something in her honor. And instead of asking for, monetary gifts and flowers, we asked that people donate to the Darling Foundation. So we founded the Darling Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization with a focus in developing persons who have the spirit like my mom. And so far, it's been a little bit rocky with COVID-19 and fundraising and things of that nature, but we did manage to have our first fundraiser and to give our first scholarship to a high school graduate of Harding University High School, which is where my mother was a teacher when she retired. And we plan to continue giving scholarships and finding ways to develop persons with that spirit. So the Darling Foundation is one way that we're trying to honor our ancestors. I want to say thank you to you, Miss Shireen, for this idea and coordinating these conversations. I think they're really good conversations that we need to have. And they don't always come up at the parties that you go to. And so I really appreciate the opportunity you gave me to talk about my mom and represent my mom, and my family and my brothers and my sisters and my father, but also you for the work that you did coordinating all these times and dates. And I know the work that is ahead to edit and make this beautiful, and I know you'll make it beautiful. So thank you.